Hi, I'm Erin Leach, and you're listening to the In the Middle of It podcast. This is a space for the ambitious woman navigating the beautiful, messy intersection of motherhood, business, and spirituality. We're here to get real about what it actually looks like to build a life that feels aligned from the inside out while moving through the seasons that stretch and shape you into the best version of yourself. So, whether you're in a season of high speed growth or quiet reflection, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Let's get ready for this week's episode. Hey friend, welcome back to In the Middle of It. It's May, which means it's Mental Health Awareness Month. And that is a topic that is near and dear to my heart for lots of reasons. Mostly my personal experience, as you know, if you've listened to any other episodes, but also my previous career before coaching and before photography was in college health promotion. So I was involved in a lot of mental health awareness with the college students then. And it's really nice that I get to talk about it again in a different way in this new career of mine. It's kind of a full circle moment, which is really cool. Today, I want to talk about the signs that my mental health personally was unraveling, and specifically ones that I missed, I overlooked, I cast aside, and just kind of ignored because I thought that I was just supposed to be able to handle everything. And I waited a long time to finally get help because I just thought that it was me not being able to get through it. And I also want to talk about what I would do differently if I had experienced that exactly the same all over again. If I understood what was happening to me in those moments and a little bit earlier than I did, things would have been a lot less challenging for me. Or at the very least, I would have just gotten help sooner. And the first part of all of this that I want to touch upon is that there's all this conversation about, the early days of postpartum and looking out for signs of anxiety and depression and whatnot. And yes, in the beginning, there are so many hormone shifts and our hormones drop, like completely plummet in so many different ways for the first like week or two. And they still continue to over literally years, just maybe not quite as drastically. But the part that took me by surprise that I think was a lot of the challenge for me in recognizing that I needed some help and that it wasn't just me is that the first 6 weeks were totally fine. I had a lot of structure holding me that I didn't really even realize I was leaning on. Scott was home. People are coming to visit and they're checking in, sending you text messages, bringing food. And there's just this constant flow of people, especially with your first child. And then 6 weeks went by. And that was when Scott went back to work. The visitors stopped coming by. That whole like newborn bliss started to fade where everybody's like, I must have it together by now, right? Or at least, I don't know, that's maybe the assumption. And also for me personally, my closest people weren't available to help very much. Just the reality of life and schedules, illnesses, injuries, all that kind of stuff. So I went from having this constant hum of presence and support to just me and Leanne every day. And also being a first time mom, I didn't realize what life would look like logistically, being home alone with the baby every day. That's hard. It's very isolating just in general. And everyone prepares you for those first days at home, the first weeks at home, but no one prepares you and says, like, hey, by the way, all of this support and love and attention and everything that you're getting is going to go away. So be prepared for it. And this is what you can do to prepare for it. No one told me that. And again, it's just the expectation that, oh, it's 6 weeks, it's 8 weeks, whatever. Like, you're settling in, you're finding your groove. When people do ask how things are going, it just feels different. It's like when we normally ask each other, hey, how you doing? And you give the generic, oh yeah, things are good, even if things are not good. It feels like that's the expectation of the conversation sometimes. So in general, you just end up stop talking about it because it feels kind of like still struggling is not necessarily socially acceptable, especially depending on who you talk to. If you're talking to your best friend, your mom, or whoever, then yeah, maybe you can be honest and open and talk about the challenges that you're facing. But there is a huge gap between all of the support that you get in the beginning and then what you don't after however long it is. For me, it just kind of coincided with the end of Scott's paternity leave. And when that attention and support kind of starts to fade around 6 weeks, plus also what I know now is this peak in fussiness and just newborn life, whatever in general, between 6 to 8 weeks. All of that happened all at the same time, just coincidentally for me, the way the cookie crumbled. So that made it even more challenging. So let's talk about the signs specifically. Because looking back, they were definitely there. I just didn't know what I was looking at. Even being very well versed in psychology and mental health, and also very self aware, just in general, of myself as a woman, I still just didn't know what to look for because postpartum was an entirely new experience for me. And I've always had some form of mental health challenges. Postpartum just made things a hell of a lot worse, specifically the rage that I felt. I was angry a lot, snappy and irritable, just like I'm sure Scott and maybe even like my mom, people around me felt like they couldn't do anything right by me. And a long time, I just felt like it was the sleep deprivation, adjusting to the new life and being stressed, all that kind of stuff, which, yes, it was. That is true. But what I've come to understand about myself is that my anger and the rage and all of that, the irritability comes out for lots of different emotions. It is the way that those emotions surface any kind of anxiety, grief, and fear, and loneliness, isolation. When I start to feel emotions that are too big and too hard to sit with, it typically just comes out as some form of irritability and anger because, for lots of reasons that I don't need to get into now, that is a more comfortable emotion for me than feeling anything else, feeling sad even. And that might be the case for another mom as well. If you find yourself constantly snapping or just like feeling off in some way, acting very different from yourself, maybe pause and just think about what is actually underneath all of this. Because the rage for me was never what it looked like on the surface. It was a signal to something else. So there might be something underneath that for you too. And the second sign that I was really struggling is that I did not recognize myself anymore. But I kept going. And I told myself I was fine. I still got up every day. I still was a mom. I still did what I needed to do. I was still functioning. I'm still there. So I would reason with myself that, well, things can't be that bad because I'm doing it. Like, this is fine. This must just be like what adjustment feels like, or this is just life with a baby. This is life as a mom. I just kept writing it off that it was normal. It's fine. But I also couldn't find myself in any of that. The version of me that's ambitious and a dreamer and had all these things on her mind She was still there, but she felt very far away in terms of like actually being her. It kind of just felt like I was missing a long distance friend. Like she's still there, you love her, and you kind of like still have this connection that you can pick up anytime, but it takes a lot to be in the presence of one another and hug each other. I just missed her, and I did not know how to get back to that woman, and did not realize for a long time that there really was no getting back to that. I had to just reconfigure life. I had to recalibrate. And overall, again, I just kept functioning. I was quote unquote fine, but functioning is not the same as being okay. You can be doing all the things and still not be okay. You can be fine without being okay. That sounds very confusing, but it is true. You can be fine without being okay. The third sign to me that got overlooked, I kind of touched upon this earlier, but everything within me got louder. And by everything, I mean specifically around like mental health type stuff. So I've talked about before on the podcast being diagnosed with OCD and ADHD, which realistically I have definitely had majority of my life. I just didn't get actually diagnosed with them until I think ADHD was 28 and OCD was just a couple of years ago, like 32-ish. And in those early months with Leon, everything that was already within me got turned way the heck up. Anxiety and intrusive thoughts, emotion dysregulation, my goodness, all of it turned up to a volume that I had not experienced before. And I have been through trials and tribulations with my emotions and mental health. This was by far the worst ever. And similar to being fine without being okay, my interpretation of all that was just kind of written off to be stressed. I'm sleep deprived. I've just got a lot going on. And not realizing that postpartum is actually a huge trigger for a lot of mental health challenges, especially when you already have something going on. I had no idea what to expect. I knew about the hormones. You hear about pregnancy hormones all the time and whatnot, but I just didn't know specifically around my own mental health challenges in the past, what that would all look like coming together. So I just kind of absorbed it as this is just me. This is how I am. Things are just like a little bit worse now because, of course, I'm adjusting. And so I just cast it away. And the fourth sign, this one being much quieter, but very much real. I was physically present, but totally mentally elsewhere. I could be folding laundry and off in la la land thinking about either photography work that I had to do or daydreaming about what life used to look like, what I wanted it to look like, wondering if I was ever going to get there, wondering if it was even possible anymore. Sitting on, sitting on the couch, feeding Leon, and thinking about a million different things, just really going through the motions sometimes. And it makes total sense because I really, a lot of the times in the beginning of Leon's life, felt like a complete stranger in my life, in my house. I did not recognize myself or like anything else anymore. And it was really jarring to go through that. And finally, the fifth sign that at least I want to include here, that finally was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. I could see how it was affecting everyone around me. Of course, Scott, it was very obvious how it was affecting him and that it was affecting him at all, but especially even Leon. and how he would respond when I would get super dysregulated and distressed and have what I just kind of ended up calling my outbursts, my moments. Even the dogs, honestly, as soon as Liam would start crying, they would make a beeline for upstairs because they had started to associate his crying with my emotions, and unpleasant ones at that. Everything felt affected by what was happening inside me. Even our moms, I could just tell, like, there's people walking on eggshells around me. And that's the moment that I knew I just can't keep explaining this away. It's not nothing. It can't be just me, because I would never intentionally behave in ways that would cause all of this distress to my family around me. I don't want them to feel this way. I don't want to feel this way myself. It was one thing to tell myself that I was managing and getting by, but it was a whole different thing to look around and see the toll that it was taking on them too. And that's the moment that I knew something really had to change. Was a day in mid-November, and finally had a conversation with Scott that I was willing to figure out where to go from there and what kind of help I needed and what that would look like. And why did I not have that conversation earlier? Well, there's a few reasons. It's never just one, right? The first being that I genuinely believed that I should just be able to handle it. I had just had a baby, but this is what women have been doing for forever. My mom has done it, my mother-in-law, my nana, many women around me have gone through motherhood and they've made it and they've been fine. So what's wrong with me that I can't figure this out? I can't handle this. And with that, I also felt like admitting I needed help was admitting that I failed. And absolutely not was I doing that. I didn't want to admit that I needed support, that motherhood was different than what I anticipated, that I needed something more outside of my house. But thankfully, I have learned that needing help is not a character flaw at all. It actually, thanks to my therapist, I have realized and accepted and embraced that asking for help is actually far more strong than just keeping it together and pushing through. Part of being able to handle motherhood is being able to say, I'm not doing well right now. I need some help. It might feel like that's giving up, but at the end of the day, it's incredibly courageous to be able to speak up and get the help that you need, whether that looks like just a neighbor coming over for a little bit, or a friend hanging out for the afternoon, or leaving to have some baby free time or something, whatever that looks like. Even if it's small, there is a lot of strength in admitting that you're just having a hard time. And it's a completely normal response to this massive life change that you just went through. We would never ask anybody else who's going through a complete life upheaval, hormonal crash with sleep deprivation and whole life reorganization all at the same time, to just call it all normal and just deal with it. But that's pretty much what moms are asked to do. And even in moments when I really wanted to ask for help or find support, the logistics of getting help felt like more than I could manage. Instead of seeing it as help and support and relief at the time for where I was at, it felt like more work to have to find a babysitter or a nanny or a daycare or something, and do all that research and go on the visits, or just the anxiety alone of bringing Leon somewhere else or having someone come to the house and care for him. Just that alone felt like so much bigger than what I was experiencing, that kind of similar to what I mentioned earlier, the discomfort of what I was experiencing was ironically more comfortable
than actually getting help. Because getting help meant I would have to deal with the anxiety of leaving Leon and trusting someone to take care of him. And at the time, dealing with all of the OCD that was popping up, that just felt impossible to do at the time. So I just decided, well, I would rather stay like this than have to deal with all of that, even if getting through those challenges of anxiety and such and relinquishing control would, in the long run, mean that I had more space to myself, like metaphorically, but literally, um, and could actually maybe feel a little bit better and be a better mom. I felt like I'm just going to white knuckle it and I'm just going to get through this and I'll take care of all of that when I have a little bit more bandwidth, so to speak. But more bandwidth doesn't really come. And I also did not get help because I didn't fully have the language for even what was wrong yet. I knew that I was not okay, but I found it very hard to articulate what ways or how I was feeling about it all. So, without knowing what's going on and what to ask for, I just kept my mouth shut. And that's a huge reason why I feel like it is important to have these conversations and talk about mental health, not just in vague terms or postpartum is hard, but legitimately the signs, the grief, all of the things that I've discussed and more, because this is just my own singular experience. Because when you can hear something being named and described in a way that you recognize in yourself, suddenly you have a place to start and you can actually advocate for yourself and get some support in whatever way that looks like. So finally, I did that around 3 or 4 months after having Leon. It was around November ish. And I finally hit a wall that I could not just look past anymore. And one particularly rough evening when I was going out for a networking event, just really, just put it simply, it was bad. I was not myself at all. And after that, I sat down with Scott and knew that something had to change. I knew it, he knew it, and I think everybody around me knew it, but I needed to be the one to say it out loud because, the whole like, you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped kind of a thing. And it's not that I didn't want to be helped. I just didn't know what kind of help I needed other than like home support while I was taking care of Leon kind of a thing. But thankfully, around that time, a friend of mine had told me about the day hospital program at Women and Infants in Providence. And Courtney, if you're listening, I am forever grateful for that one conversation. It seriously changed everything. She was that friend that she visited me at my photo studio at the time and knew that I had just had a baby. I think I had Liam with me at the time and asked me like, "So how you doing?" And I gave the glossed over answer of, "Oh yeah, things are rough with a newborn, but we're okay." And she's like, "No, but like how are you doing?" And it's really meaningful. I'll just say as like a quick side tangent, it is really meaningful when someone can be vulnerable enough themselves to hold that space for you and ask you truly how you're doing and to take time out of their day to actually give a damn about you. And like Courtney was not my best friend or anything like that. So she did not have to. She could have just said, "That's great. Like, I'm so glad. I know newborn life is so rough." Like, her son is just a little bit older than Leon. So she got it. But thankfully, just with her asking that question and me feeling like there was a door that I could walk through and could open up to her, it gave her the opportunity to tell me about the day hospital program. And I looked it up at that time and I bookmarked it for a later date, and then ultimately pulled it back up when I had this conversation with Scott and decided to give them a call. And I went in for like the initial assessment and whatnot. And honestly, everything about it was great until she started to talk about the actual logistics of the program being Monday through Friday, 9 to 2 for on average 3 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, anywhere in there. And my reaction was, whoa, how am I even going to do that? How am I going to nurse and or pump? How's Leon going to nap somewhere that's not home? It was bright as all get out and loud with like a dozen other women in a room talking and playing videos for the educational components and stuff. How the heck am I going to get through all of this? How does this even work? And what I realized was that this time is going to pass anyway. And in reality, it's only a few weeks. It's going to probably be a tough few weeks, but those 3 weeks are going to pass anyways, whether I do the program or not. And I knew I needed it. And I was really worried about the financial commitment of it because by the time I got into the initial assessment, it was January. So our annual out of pocket max had reset after having Leon, unfortunately. So I knew that it was going to cost us a little bit of money, but I just decided, okay, I know I need to do this program. The time is going to go by, so I might as well try to do something that's going to make it better. And the cost of not doing this program is way more than the whatever it was, $1,200 or something that we had to pay for out of pocket. And so I did it. I figured out the logistics that felt impossible, and I navigated all of it with the early mornings and getting us out of the house, even navigating through some sleep challenges that we discovered were actually feeding challenges. And honestly, I'm so glad that I decided to do that because, not to be dramatic or anything, but the program possibly saved my life, definitely saved my marriage, and the ripple out effect to my family was definitely not subtle. And that's also where I got my OCD diagnosis, but I'm going to save that for another episode coming soon because that just deserves its own conversation, all in all. So, if I could go back and if I could do things differently, this is what I would do. Or if I had a best friend or someone who is about to have a baby, this is what I would tell them in terms of all the trials and tribulations and being able to ask for support. First, I would say that recognize when your support may start to fade and build in some other kind of scaffold for yourself rather than white knuckling it alone. Whether that be when your partner goes back to work, when the visitors stop, or whatever that looks like, whether it's 6 weeks or 12 weeks, that is not the moment to put your head down and push through it. That's the moment when you need to deliberately look around, find your people, and build your village. Like, it takes a village. Yes, it truly does. And unfortunately, we do not live in villages anymore like we used to. So we have to be intentional about creating those connections on our own and knowing that, okay, I can call upon this person and this person and this person. And even if you never actually need to reach out to anybody for actual support, sometimes just knowing that that is your network of people is enough to help you manage better. It's like this weird, like, placebo effect, kind of. And even if you yourself acknowledge who those people are and kind of like have the mental note or a literal physical note or digital on your phone about who you can lean on for support, I would really even say take it a step further and reach out to those people and say, hey, I know that life is about to get really crazy when so and so goes back to work. If I need help, would you be willing to come over? Or whatever that looks like. Because then they're kind of primed to be there and be ready and know that if you are reaching out to them, it's for a reason. It's not just because, like, you're friends and you want to hang out with them, or, that you're giving them a chance to see the baby or whatever. They know that they're needed. And if you don't ask, people are not just going to assume that you need help and offer it. They're going to think you're fine because you look like you're managing. You have to tell them otherwise. And I would also recommend, don't wait to tell someone that you are not okay until you're like about to fall off the cliff. Don't wait until you're at the edge. Maybe when you're like 4 steps behind the edge, at least. You don't have to be in any form of a crisis to deserve support, let alone hitting rock bottom. Just kind of struggling is also enough. Just having things be hard is enough. You don't need a more quote unquote serious reason than that. It's enough. And even if what you are currently experiencing is technically fine, you can still have a desire for things to be better and ask for support to get there. You can take a more proactive approach and say, hey, I know that this is just going to be hard. It's not hard yet, but would you mind coming over on Fridays? Could we meet up at the playground or whatever that looks like? Recognizing those pockets of time where you might need a little bit more support and arranging for that to happen before you actually experience the hard times. And when you do ask for that support, whenever it is, what I really would love to do differently, if I could only do this alone, it would be a game changer, is to not make it mean anything about myself. I made myself feel like straight up poo if I needed any kind of support. I literally told myself when it came to breastfeeding and that not working out that, well, if I could just figure this out, if I could just make it work, if I could, have better boobs or whatever, if I hadn't created a baby that had oral issues, then I wouldn't be costing my family money by needing to buy formula. I put all of this pressure on myself and all of this burden and guilt on myself when it had nothing to do with me. I made myself feel like, well, if I could just handle motherhood, if I could just get my ish together, then I wouldn't need XYZ amount of support because I was doing the day hospital program. Then nope, I wouldn't need to be spending this money on the day hospital program. I was not compassionate with myself at all. And it just made it so much worse to get through all of that. And it had nothing to do with my fitness to be a mom. I don't even know if that's the way that you're supposed to say that, but I hope you know what I mean. It's not a character flaw or a failure that something is fundamentally wrong with me. It's just a really hard season. It's hard. There's no way around it. The first few months, if not longer, for some babies and some moms and some families are just really hard, especially if you have existing conditions that magnify what the hard looks like. You are not your emotions. You are not the intrusive thoughts and the spiraling. Those things are happening to you. They are not you. And at the time, I just didn't have the tools to handle those things. But thankfully, with some wonderful providers and a lot of resources, when I stopped making them about my identity, that's when I could actually start doing something about them and release this guilt and this burden that I was carrying around that made motherhood just feel so incredibly heavy. So if you are currently in the thick of newborn land, or even if you've been 3 years into motherhood or something, and you still feel like you're running on fumes and you're like kind of low key pretending that you're not, then I hope that you kind of have a little bit better feeling after listening to this, that what you're experiencing and what you're feeling does not make you a bad mom. It just makes you a human being who is doing something really flapjack and hard, and you probably needed more support than you have or had. Or maybe you haven't asked for it yet because you've been telling yourself that you should just be able to figure it out. And you do not need to handle this alone. We were never supposed to handle any of this alone. But unfortunately, modern day society has created this isolation of moms and taken away this whole, like, it takes a village type of thing. But if you are in Rhode Island or somewhat local to Rhode Island and you're struggling, I genuinely recommend looking into Women and Infants Day Hospital Program. Like I said, it was a total lifeline for me. And if you're not local to Rhode Island, there are other programs like that across the country. I will say I have learned that there are not many, which is a complete oversight and disservice to moms. But alas, maybe do a search, talk to your OB or your midwife, or even just finding a therapist that specializes in perinatal mental health can help make some connections and some resources. And even before that, just one honest conversation with someone who loves you is a perfectly great place to start. And I'm going to wrap up because the baby is upstairs awake from his nap, but I will catch you next week. Thank you so much for being here. This is In the Middle of It. And just remember that you are never, ever alone. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to In the Middle of It. If you found some inspiration in this episode, I'm sure it'll inspire others too. So head over to your podcast player, hit that subscribe or follow button, and leave a 5-star rating or review. It might seem small, but your review will help more women find these conversations and join our empowering community. You can also empower the women closest to you with a simple, "Hey, this made me think of you." So text this episode to a friend, or maybe even your mom. Whoever in your life is also in their own messy middle. You can even take a screenshot of this episode, tag me at I am Erin Leach, and post it to your stories. I can't wait to connect with you online until we meet back here again next week for the next episode of In the Middle of It podcast.